It's time for the Daily Stand Up Podcast presented by AgileDad with your host, Lee Henson. Without any further ado, let's get started. I've seen some additional conversation regarding roles, responsibilities, accountabilities, and interactions, and there's just been a lot of questions and concerns over clarity about those roles. When you're trying to assess what's going on within your organization, this is one of the steps in a 12-step program. In fact, this is step 3 of clear identification and delineation of roles and accountabilities. When we start talking about that, this is a common thread. It's a common problem that Agile organizations face. Agile teams are rarely so simple that they follow the Scrum guide completely and have a single Scrum Master, a single product owner, and 3 to 9 developers. Uh, there's always someone else around the team that supports them in some way, whether it's a business analyst, a functional analyst, a technical analyst, a partner, a contractor, or they're a contractor for a bigger group. There's always some additional interaction that takes place. Um, so there's nothing wrong with having to lean on other people from the outside. But things certainly get complicated quickly when you try to keep track of who does what, who's talking to who, how do we avoid duplicity or overcomplication of projects that we're working on. So I think it's important for you to figure out who's playing what role. So I'm going to give you a list of the top 3 tips that I have to make certain that you're not going to have duplicity of effort or that you're not going to have overcompensation in certain areas and that you've got roles identified and designated how they should be. So here are your 3 tips. Tip number 1, make certain that everyone understands which roles are full-time roles and which roles can be dual responsibility. Now, that does differ from organization to organization, depending on the type, scope, and size of the organization and their culture, etc. So it's not anything set in concrete, which makes it a little more complicated. However, you should certainly make sure that your Scrum Master isn't governing more than 3 teams. Scrum Masters always govern 1 to 3 teams. Product owners can manage multiple products. However, they should only be focused on a limited amount of WIP. Maybe 1 product and scope are in flight at any given time. You want to make sure your developers, okay, you have anywhere from 5 to 9 people on a team, but that they're brown, they're cross-pollinated, or they're gray. They do some testing as well as development. It's not like they could just do one job and walk away. So I think as long as you have the right blend of people, you're going to be okay on your project. Okay, tip number 2. No matter what you do, make sure you separate the work and the people management. I'm going to say it again. Whatever you do, make sure you separate the management of work with management of people. If you manage to work correctly, the teams of people can swarm to complete the work. If you're only focused on managing the people and reorganizing the people, the work will sit in waiting or the work will sit in progress and will never get completed. Make sure you're breaking down the scope of work small enough that you can get those things done and you get things delivered. And then, of course, number 3, when it comes to roles and accountabilities and responsibilities, is make sure this is the most important one. Make sure that you call out by name who's doing what accountability or responsibility. If that's something that Joe does, then make sure we say that Joe does it. Don't worry so much about what Joe's title is, because if we sit here and focus all of our attention on titles and responsibilities, as far as what the resume, or not the resume, but the job opening says you should do, the job posting, you'll never get to the accountabilities of what Joe really does and why Joe makes a difference. So I think it's important for us to identify where roles are spread too thin, where roles are being um, not being fulfilled, where we have gaps. And I think that if we take the time to identify gaps and take the time to fill in those gaps and take the time to identify roles, it's going to help us have a more successful Scrum implementation. So I think it's important for us to really, if we want to have successful Agile, take a step back, see where we are, assess our roles and accountabilities, maybe stay away from formal things like Gracie, but figure out who's doing what, keep a written document. I always have a tip for this. So the main thing that I would ask you to do as an exercise is a little exercise I call man on a street. And what I'm asking you to do is put yourself in a position where you could say to yourself, okay, we're getting ready to hire the next new admin for this team. And challenge yourself to write down, if you were the new admin who came in on job day 1, what type of things would you have liked to know? What type of things would you like to, if you're a new Scrum Master, a new team member, what type of things would you have liked to know? What would have made your job easier? What would have made it easier for you to function? And identify what things currently exist and where your gaps are and fill in those gaps. One of those gaps certainly is how we organize and understand work. Another big one is the organization and accountability and roles and responsibilities, as well as people who work around you. Because I guarantee you, once you get those roles and responsibilities and accountabilities under control, it's going to make it a lot easier for you to produce work. Okay, that's going to do it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have a topic you want us to discuss, learn more at agiledad.com. We'd love to hear from you. And as always, we encourage you to stay healthy, stay well, and stay agile, my friends. Until next time, do take care.